Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, April 30th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the Senate elections for 2024, 2026, and potentially years beyond. Now, from the title of this video, I'm sure you probably think that this is sort of just a doomer situation where I am pretty much dooming on the Democratic Party's chances at victory in future elections. Now, before you comment or disagree with my opinion, I do want to say that we should look at this from a very nonpartisan standpoint, and that I would encourage you to watch the entirety of this video to get a general understanding of why I'm actually coming at this situation with such a conclusion already just years out before these elections have actually occurred. Of course, things can very much change, and I think that American politics, if anything, does change pretty significantly. But at the same time, I do want to say that sometimes things just don't add up for a certain political party, and in this case, that is the Democratic Party. Now, taking a look at the elections that are the ones that are most upcoming, we have our Senate elections for 2022. I'm going to characterize all of the states as to how they are currently held in the balance of power, meaning that all of the states that are currently red I'm going to characterize as Republican, and all the states that are Democratic I'm going to characterize as Democratic. Now, of course, some of these states might change in terms of overall partisanship, and for the sake of actually recognizing that there is a midterm election right around the corner, I'm going to go ahead and stick with my projection. My most recent one can be found on this website, map.jacksonjude.com. I use this all the time for comparing my most recent projections versus the more newer ones, or my recent ones versus the older ones. What I have so far is that Georgia is going to go red and Pennsylvania is going to go blue. Seems like it would balance it out, and then you take a look at the map and you actually see the Republicans are gaining in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada rather than just Georgia. So Arizona and Nevada are definitely states that I could imagine going back and forth, but for right now we're going to stick with my most recent projection, which has fluctuated a bit over time. You know, at one point New Hampshire was red, Pennsylvania was red, and they could very well be red. They could also very well remain in their expected column right now, which is the Democratic column. So let's enter into our future elections with the assumption that Republicans do make some type of gain. To ignore the imminent red wave is to completely just take a step back. I will also take into consideration the calculations and the expectations that potentially Democrats do maintain their current advantage in the United States Senate. What that means is that Democrats hold on to every seat that they hold right now. For right now, we're going to use my most recent projection, but I'm not going to also ignore the possibility that Democrats could be equalized out. And since the election actually hasn't occurred, I would also like to consider that situation as well. So, where does this conclusion come from? Where is this real idea that the Democratic Party simply isn't going to do as well as we might think in future Senate elections? And it comes a lot from the upcoming Senate elections in 2024 and 2026. The maps here just simply aren't favorable for the Democratic Party, to put it quite literally. I mean, seeing our Senate maps for 2022, the Democratic Party lucked out. And I say they lucked out because there weren't as many swing states in this map as there were in 2020 or as there were in 2018. And the reason for that is because Democrats don't really have many swing seats that they are defending in this election cycle. At most, the Republican Party in a wave type of year is winning 54 seats. That used to be standard for an opposition party. Now that's just going to be the maximum that they can get. And it's not going to be super difficult to see how they get there, but 2024 is going to be a year where the Republican Party is likely going to really hone in on many of these individual races and make it very difficult for the Democratic Party to win. This is the map for 2024, the upcoming Senate elections in the presidential election year. And one thing straight off the bat that you might notice is that there is a lot more blue than there is red. Based off of this map so far, the Republican Party is only going to be defending a total number of 10 seats. Back in 2018, they were only defending a total number of 8 seats. 10 versus 8, nothing super significant, but the difference is that these margins here are so little. The Democratic Party is defending a super significant amount of seats. If you take a look at what is up for them, what you will find is that we can actually count here, but it should be somewhere around 23. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 23 seats for 2024, whereas the Republican Party will be defending 10. 23 seats in which many of them went to Donald Trump on the statewide level back in 2016. Many of them went to Donald Trump on the statewide level in 2020. If you take a look at the election history, so many of these states are going to be pickup opportunities for the GOP, whereas the Democratic Party, when you search around, what about Utah? No. What about Wyoming? No. North Dakota? No. Nebraska? No. Missouri? No. Tennessee? No. Mississippi? No. And Indiana? No. Leaving the Republican Party, realistically, only 2 seats that would be competitive. On the other hand, for the Democratic Party, let's go ahead and take a look. Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Montana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and Virginia. That is 11 states that I can imagine being competitive. Now, depending on whether or not incumbents run, we take Virginia out if Tim Kaine runs again. We take Minnesota out if Amy Klobuchar runs again. We take New Mexico out if Martin Heinrich runs again. But where does this leave us? 8 races that will undoubtedly be competitive. Even if you find Debbie Stabenow running in Michigan, she had a competitive race in 2018. Tammy Baldwin isn't going to win by 10 because this isn't 2018. Pennsylvania is going to be competitive as well. These are states that, in coinciding with a presidential election, will be competitive. At the end of the day, even if we are at a base level where the Democratic Party is winning exactly where they are right now, the Republican Party is absolutely poised for victory, especially if they already have a 52 to 48 seat advantage. Some immediate ones that could very well go if things end up turning against the incumbent Democratic senators here: Montana, West Virginia, Ohio, 3 states that have routinely voted for Donald Trump and the Republican Party in elections since Donald Trump's first election and have really handed the GOP some pretty strong victories in 2020. West Virginia being a 30-point margin to victory, Ohio being 8, and Montana being about 20 for President Trump. It's not difficult to see how Republicans end up winning in these states. In addition to that, I would also like to say, the Republican Party does very well in down-ballot races. In 2020, they lost a lot on the top of the ticket, but when it came down to state legislative races, to House elections, to Senate elections, with the exception of Georgia, the Republican Party actually outperformed President Trump. Now, even if Joe Biden is to win again in 2024, which doesn't look the likeliest outcome at this point in time, there is still a very real possibility that many of these states do flip. It's super difficult to see how Joe Manchin survives if, at any point in time, the composition of the Senate changes. And I say that because he no longer becomes the center of attention, and thus falls out of recognition and popularity across the state. Montana, I would also like to say, definitely can serve as a state where, in a normal year, 2024, 2020, Jon Tester wouldn't be able to win because he would be coinciding with a presidential election. It was different in 2018 when the entire purpose of turning out was primarily to oppose President Trump. But when you have voters here already voting for Republicans on the top of the ticket, which I can guarantee you Montana will be a GOP double-digit state, it's very difficult to see how 20% of the entire state votes for both the Republican Party on the presidential level and then for a Democrat in the United States Senate, especially considering that their missions and their plans for the country are very, very different. In a midterm election, it's an entirely different scenario. So Montana, West Virginia, Ohio just not adding into the mix. And imagine if a Republican does have a good type of year in 2024. There goes Arizona. There goes Nevada. Potentially Pennsylvania. Potentially Michigan. Potentially Wisconsin. And off that alone, even if the Democratic Party was to win every single seat they have right now in 2022 and move on to 2024, it's an automatic GOP victory. An automatic GOP majority. Let's head into 2026. 2026 is a year that is very similar to 2020. That's because it's the same exact map with an exception of a Georgia special election being absent and the exception of an Arizona special election being absent. Beyond that, we are now in this position, I think maybe also California. Looking at where we are, what you find is that the Senate map here shows the Republican Party in a position where they are defending a lot of seats. But where are the competitive Republican seats, might you ask? Okay, you have Texas, depending on whoever's president. If a Republican is president, sure. If a Democrat's president, probably not. Okay, you have Iowa. But do you really? It'd be an interesting case to see whether or not a Republican would actually end up being competitive in Iowa at this point in time. There is a lot of signs telling us that Iowa is getting redder and redder, and 6 years down the line from the 2020 election, where Joni Ernst, as the incumbent, won by about 6 points, probably will be more competitive. What do you have next to turn to? North Carolina? Okay, realistically, that could be one. But beyond that, you're pretty stuck. Maine is probably the last state where I would say if Susan Collins isn't to run, the Democratic Party takes out the instant advantage. But if she is to run, then it becomes a lot trickier. Sarah Gideon couldn't defeat Susan Collins. There's no guarantee that another Democrat would, especially if 2026 isn't as pro-Dem as 2020 was. The point is that the opportunities for the Democratic Party in 2026 are likely not enough to counteract the majority expanded to in 2024. Baseline, I think the Democratic Party at most gets 50 seats in 2022. A gain is completely out of the window as of right now. So a 50-50 map would still set the Democrats back in 2024, but make it potentially possible the Democrats win in 2026 if they play their cards correctly. But that would also count on them winning in New Hampshire, another swing state, and Virginia, another swing state, Georgia, another swing state, Colorado, New Mexico, Michigan. These are states that are competitive, and you would be asking Democrats to be competitive in all of them, Minnesota, right? And need them to win every single one of those races and then even expand beyond that. My concern here for the Democratic Party is that even in a neutral position, they don't get enough seats in 2024 and 2026. That means the Republican lead in the United States Senate will likely last 6 years or more. The Democratic Party is in a very tricky position at this point in time because 2024 is not looking good. 2022 already has been predetermined as expected and likely going to be a red wave year. And 2024 is not looking any better when it comes down to opportunities. I mean, quite literally, the Democratic Party's only realistic shots at victory are in Texas and Florida. And depending who's running on the presidential level, they soon become impossible. If Ron DeSantis is on that ballot, forget it about both of those states. Maybe if Donald Trump is. But then again, you're competing on a presidential level where Donald Trump has already won both of these states, and I wouldn't be surprised if he won them again in 2024. It's very plausible, and if he runs, very likely that he does end up winning them again. And that Republicans down the ballot, which already outperformed him back in 2020, would likely outperform him again. And as for those Democrats in Montana, West Virginia, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, expect a very significant competitive race here. One that could truly be, the Democratic Party's exodus from control of the United States Senate for quite some time, meaning that this could really screw them over for many, many years to come. And 2026 does not provide really any redeeming qualities. Democrats made South Carolina competitive because they had a good candidate, and also Lindsey Graham wasn't popular. It's very likely he wins that seat again. There was no reason to contest Mitch McConnell, even though Amy McGrath did. She still lost by about 15 points. Taking a look at Kansas, it was potentially competitive depending on whether or not Chris Kobach won the nomination. He did not win the nomination. There was no real point in continuing to contest it. Montana was competitive because you had a popular governor running for election there, but even he lost by 10 points. These are states that might have been competitive back in 2020 that will more than likely not be competitive in 2026. Depending on who the incumbent is in Texas, that could be a possibility, but realistically, what we find in terms of competitiveness or potential competitiveness, all you really find for the Democratic Party is Maine, North Carolina, and maybe Iowa, and maybe Texas. Beyond that, you're really stuck. These states simply have such a strong grip with the GOP, and because the Republican Party typically does win states that are smaller and states that are more rural, they had the same amount of Senate seats as California. South Carolina and California are on the same exact level. South Dakota and New York are on the same exact level in the United States Senate. That's why some Democrats have come out and said that the Senate is inherently undemocratic. But at the end of the day, it's a system that they will need to work within and a system that they will need to use in order to pass legislation and make an impact. And without it, they really find themselves in a very difficult position. Just as the Republicans did when they controlled the House for 4 years leading up to their control of the Senate, they can serve as obstructionists for President Biden or potentially any Democratic president that is there. And also aid in the Republican Party's advancements. The Republicans are more than likely going to get the House. The question is, do they get the Senate? But if not now, when? It is a very real reality that the Republican Party will control the Senate at some point in the next 4 years. The question is when? Is it now, or is it in 2 years after? Or potentially, is it 2026? I would argue that 2024 is a certainty that the GOP wins control of the Senate, but that's only if they don't get it right now. The Republican Party will also likely experience a majority that is similar to their 2014 type levels. Not after 2022, but certainly after 2024, which means we will likely see ourselves in a position where the Democratic Party is going to need to start to shift bases. They are going to need to start to win in competitive states again. They are going to need to win in Florida. They are going to need to win in Texas. They are going to need to win in North Carolina. All 3 of these states have 6 Republican senators despite being very competitive states. Iowa, another competitive state with 2 Republican senators. That's the problem. The problem is Democrats aren't competitive in many of these states or aren't winning in many of these states, whereas Republicans are demolishing in their safe states. And that's enough to put them in very comfortable positions, not only for 2022, not only for 2024, but also 2 years after in 2026. All 3 classes of Senate do not benefit the Democratic Party. There are very little options for them, and it just doesn't look good. There, of course, can be some type of major turnaround in the United States Senate contingent on the November elections, but after that, I can guarantee you, the Republicans gain seats in 2024. Unless something super significant happens, the Republican Party gains seats across the nation. 2026 doesn't look that much better for the Democratic Party. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server if you could go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.